One man robbed the wrong house and paid with his life. Another sought revenge and lost his freedom forever. Tonight, we uncover a deadly chain reaction where silence was more powerful than survival and loyalty to the street code ended in blood. This is not just a crime story, it's a warning. April 10th, 2023. A quiet evening settles over Scorton Avenue in Blackpool. Behind one of the modest brick-front flats, chaos is unfolding, but no one on the street knows it yet. Inside, 32-year-old John Hutchinson lies slumped over a torn sofa, his breathing shallow, his body barely holding together. Blood seeps across the carpet beneath him like a spreading shadow. His face is swollen, ribs shattered, organs silently failing. Every breath is a battle, and he is losing. Police officers step through the broken doorway, their radios crackling in the background. They've seen scenes like this before, but something feels different. This isn't just a beating, it's a message. They kneel beside Hutchinson. "Who did this to you?" one officer asks. Silence. "Do you know their names? Can you describe them?" Still nothing. He could speak, he could save his life, yet Hutchinson's lips stay sealed. Even on the brink of death, he refuses to betray the street code. No snitching, no cooperation, no names. In the criminal world he came from, silence isn't just pride, it's survival. But tonight, that silence is killing him faster than the injuries. The officers exchange helpless looks. Legally, they can't force answers. Without a statement, they can't make arrests. All they can do is wait for an ambulance and hope he makes it. But deep down, they know he won't. Hours earlier, Hutchinson had made two decisions that would seal his fate. First, he robbed the wrong man. Second, even after being found half dead, he clung to a code that offered him honor but no protection. No last words, no confession, no justice. Just silence. As paramedics lift him onto a stretcher, one question lingers in the air like smoke. What kind of loyalty is worth dying for? To the outside world, Blackpool is a seaside escape. Neon-lit arcades, fish and chips, roller coasters rattling along the famous Pleasure Beach. Families visit for fun. Tourists leave with souvenirs and selfies. But behind the glittering seafront lies another Blackpool entirely, one most visitors will never see. By the early 2020s, Blackpool had become one of the most deprived areas in the UK. The jobs were gone. The tourists spent less. The money dried up, but desperation grew. Streets that once echoed with laughter now echoed with debt, addiction, and survival. And in places where hope disappears, crime moves in. Liverpool crime syndicates saw opportunity. They flooded Blackpool with heroin and crack cocaine using the County Lines network, sending young runners into coastal towns to expand territory. Addicts were trapped in endless debt. Quiet neighborhoods turned into silent battlegrounds. Behind closed doors, normal homes became stash houses. Teenagers became lookouts. Violence wasn't loud, it was whispered, organized, calculated. In this world, reputation was worth more than money, and fear was its currency. And two men ruled different levels of this hierarchy. Daniel Cunningham, a man with two faces. To neighbors on Tarnbrook Drive, he was a polite father, always nodding hello, taking the bins out on time. But in the criminal network, he was known, a mid-level dealer with deep connections to Liverpool suppliers. He didn't just sell drugs, he controlled supply. His image, his authority, his respect, that was his armor. On the other end stood John Hutchinson, not a kingpin, not a supplier. He was a taxer, a hyena of the streets. Instead of selling drugs, he robbed those who did. He preyed on other criminals, taking what he could, quick, dirty scores. It was risky, it was reckless, and it worked until it didn't. Hutchinson believed he could tell the difference between targets he could handle and those he couldn't. But on April 10th, 2023, he picked the wrong house. And in Blackpool's underworld, being robbed wasn't just theft, it was humiliation. And humiliation demands blood. It was just after midnight on April 10th, 2023. Coastal rain hammered the windows of Daniel Cunningham's quiet family home on Tarnbrook Drive. Inside, he and his wife slept soundly, unaware that 3 masked men were about to shatter their world. The front door exploded inward with a single kick. Wood splintered like a shotgun blast. Heavy footsteps thundered up the stairs. Before Cunningham could fully react, they were in his bedroom. 3 figures, all masked, all armed, hammers raised in the dim light. They didn't bother with threats. Their message was short and sharp. "Where's the money? Where's the gear?" Cunningham had seconds to decide: fight, flee, or submit. He wasn't stupid. He knew 3 armed intruders in his home meant one thing. This wasn't a robbery, this was a warning. So he complied. He handed over bags of Class A drugs, stock worth between £21,000 and £40,000, gone in seconds. The men fled as quickly as they came, leaving behind broken glass and a trembling wife whose hands shook as she dialed 999. Minutes later, police arrived, but they got nothing. No names, no descriptions, no cooperation. Cunningham stood there, bruised pride hidden behind a cold stare. Not because he didn't know who did it, but because he did. In that brief struggle, one mask slipped just enough. He recognized him. John Hutchinson, the taxer, the hyena, the street thief who thought he could hit anyone and walk away. Cunningham didn't tell police because he had no intention of letting them handle it. This wasn't about justice. This was about reputation. If word got out that Daniel Cunningham, the man connected to Liverpool suppliers, got robbed in his own home and did nothing, his entire operation would collapse. His customers would laugh, his rivals would circle, his supplier would question if he was still fit to run business. So he made a decision that would change everything. He wouldn't report the robbery. He'd avenge it. And the man he called was far more dangerous than John Hutchinson could ever imagine. When Daniel Cunningham made that phone call to Liverpool, he wasn't asking for advice. He was declaring war. On the other end of the line was Lee Clark, a heavyweight in the Merseyside underworld. His territory stretched across city streets, docks, and coastal towns like Blackpool. He wasn't just a supplier, he was an enforcer of order, and nothing disrupted order like weakness. Cunningham's message was short, steady, controlled. "Hutchinson hit me, 40 grand gone." To anyone else, it would have been just another robbery. But in Clark's world, this was more than theft. It was a challenge. If someone could rob one of his protected dealers and walk away without consequence, then anyone could. Word would spread. Confidence in his protection would crumble, and empire collapses begin with whispers. That could not be allowed. Clark didn't hesitate. Hutchinson had to be found, but Clark wasn't going to hunt him alone. He began assembling a crew built for one purpose: retaliation. First, Darren McCabe, a gaunt addict with sunken eyes and a desperate hunger for his next fix. But what he lacked in stability, he made up for in street instincts. He knew every alleyway, every rumor, every person who owed him a favor. For £200, he agreed to locate Hutchinson. Next, David Bond, a man whose name alone was enough to quiet a room. A known Liverpool enforcer, built like a tank, violent with precision. Bond wasn't chaotic, he was methodical. If Clark was the general, Bond was the executioner. The plan was simple. McCabe would track Hutchinson down. Clark and Bond would deliver the message. The stolen goods would be reclaimed. The punishment would be unforgettable. By early afternoon on the same day of the robbery, the hunt had begun. Hutchinson didn't even know death was already on its way. McCabe was seen in a pub muttering to himself, "I've got to go after some guy. I'm going to kill him, need the money." Hours later, he found the target. And with that, the revenge machine was in motion. cold, focused, unstoppable. John Hutchinson thought he was clever, thought he'd made a big score and could disappear into the shadows for a while. But that night, the shadows were already watching him. After the robbery, Hutchinson fled to a friend's flat on Scorton Avenue, hoping to lay low until tempers cooled. But this wasn't a world where grudges faded. This was a world where retribution arrived faster than regret. McCabe, fueled by desperation and the promise of £200, moved through Blackpool like a bloodhound. Witnesses later recalled him barging into Hutchinson's girlfriend's address, waving a knife, shouting, "Tell him the Scousers are coming. He'll be dead soon." The message traveled fast. Hutchinson's girlfriend immediately phoned him. "They're coming for you." That should have been the moment he really ran. Left town, went off-grid. But instead, Hutchinson stayed. Maybe he didn't believe the threat. Maybe pride told him they wouldn't dare. Either way, he waited. Meanwhile, the revenge squad was on the move. A gray Ford Fiesta cut through Blackpool's wet streets. Inside sat Lee Clark and David Bond, silent, focused, weapons beside them, a hammer, a metal bar, a wooden pole. Tools not of chaos, but of purpose. McCabe led them straight to Scorton Avenue. By 6 p.m., CCTV captured the trio near the flat. The drizzle shimmered in the streetlights as they approached the door. There was no knock. The entrance exploded inwards with one brutal blow. Inside, Hutchinson and a friend froze. Panic flashed across Hutchinson's face, the realization that this was the consequence of his gamble. David Bond struck first. He dragged Hutchinson to the ground as the others swarmed. What followed wasn't a fight, it was punishment. The hammer came down. Again and again, each blow deliberate, not wild, controlled, a message written in blood. Broken and gasping, Hutchinson finally spoke, revealing where he'd stashed the stolen drugs. The revenge mission was complete. But what the attackers didn't know, John Hutchinson was dying. And now, a beating had unknowingly become murder. The news of Aisha and Dr. Karim's affair traveled like wildfire through the hospital corridors, and soon it seeped into their homes. But it hit one person harder than anyone else, Aisha's mother. Back in the Philippines, she had always believed her daughter was living a successful and honorable life abroad. She would proudly tell neighbors, "My daughter is a nurse in Dubai. She sends money every month. She's living the dream." But that illusion shattered overnight. A distant relative who worked in Dubai called her in tears and said, "Tita, Aisha is in trouble. There are rumors, bad ones." At first, her mother refused to believe it. "Not my daughter, she's a good girl," she insisted. But when she confronted Aisha during a video call, it was the first time her daughter didn't smile. The silence between them was heavier than words. "Ma, I made a mistake," Aisha whispered. Her mother didn't yell, she didn't curse. She simply said, "Come home before you lose yourself completely." But it was already too late. Aisha couldn't leave Dubai. Karim had become too controlling. He didn't allow her to go out with friends anymore. He checked her phone constantly. He even insisted on picking her up after every shift, claiming it was for protection. But deep down, Aisha knew it was possession. She later discovered that Karim had deleted messages from her mother, keeping her isolated. Her once bright life had become a cage. Meanwhile, Karim's wife, Layla, was fighting her own emotional battle. She hired a private investigator and obtained photo evidence of the affair. But instead of confronting them publicly, she chose something far more dangerous: silent revenge. She started manipulating Karim's emotions, making him feel watched, guilty, and paranoid. She would leave small hints: a misplaced earring in his car, a lipstick-stained cup on his desk. Not because she wanted him to confess, but because she wanted him to self-destruct under pressure. And that is exactly what began to happen. Two women, one in silence, one in fear, and one man trapped between lies. The tension was building, and soon it would explode. Karim was no longer the composed and confident surgeon everyone once admired. Sleep-deprived, constantly anxious, and consumed by paranoia, he began making mistakes in the operating room. Nurses whispered behind his back. Senior doctors started questioning his competence. But no one knew the truth. He wasn't battling exhaustion. He was battling guilt and fear. Layla's silent psychological warfare was working. She didn't scream, she didn't argue. She simply acted normal, but her eyes followed him everywhere. She would casually say things like, "You seem tired lately. Something troubling you?" Or, "Strange how people lose themselves when they think no one is watching." Every word felt like a dagger. Meanwhile, Aisha sensed the change in Karim. He was more aggressive now, less loving, more controlling. He accused her of cheating whenever she didn't answer his calls immediately. He forced her to quit hanging out with even her closest colleague, Maria. "You're mine," he would say, "only mine." Aisha realized something terrifying. This wasn't love anymore. This was obsession. One evening, she made a decision. She packed a small bag and planned to escape to the Philippines without telling Karim. She booked a flight for the next morning. She was ready to leave everything behind, her job, her dreams, even the man she once loved. But fate had other plans. Karim arrived unannounced at her apartment that night. He saw the packed suitcase. "Where are you going?" he asked coldly. Aisha froze. She tried to lie, "It's just a vacation." But the look in his eyes said he already knew. His voice dropped to a whisper, "You think you can leave me after everything?" Aisha's heart pounded. "Karim, please, this is not healthy anymore. We're hurting too many people." But instead of calming down, Karim snapped. He grabbed her arm tightly. "If I can't have you, no one will." For the first time, Aisha saw death in his eyes. What happened next would shock everyone. The air in Aisha's apartment felt heavy, thick with unspoken fear. Karim's grip tightened around her arm, his breathing uneven, eyes wild. For a moment, Aisha thought he might calm down, but rage had already consumed him. She tried to pull away gently. "Karim, you're scaring me. Please, let's talk." But he wasn't listening. "After everything I sacrificed, you think you can just walk away," he hissed. His words trembled between heartbreak and insanity. Aisha's instincts kicked in. She shoved him back and ran toward the door. But Karim lunged forward, pushing it shut. A table lamp fell to the floor, shattering. The room plunged into half-darkness, illuminated only by the flickering light from the hallway. Aisha screamed for help. No one came. Karim covered her mouth. Tears streamed down his face, not of sorrow, but of twisted desperation. In that moment, Aisha realized she wasn't fighting the man she loved. She was fighting a man who had already lost himself. They struggled violently. She scratched his face. He hit her in panic. The sound of chaos echoed through the small apartment. Then silence. Aisha lay motionless on the floor. Karim stood frozen, his hands shaking, staring at what he had done. Minutes felt like hours. Reality hit him like a storm. He paced back and forth, breathing heavily, muttering to himself. He didn't cry, he didn't scream, he simply whispered, "No one can know." What he did next was colder than the act itself. He wrapped Aisha's body in a hospital laundry sheet, used his medical ID to sneak into a restricted morgue area late at night. And there, he hid her inside a freezer meant for unidentified bodies. He closed the door and walked away. To everyone else, Aisha had simply gone missing. But truth has a way of resurfacing. And when Aisha's frozen body was finally discovered days later, Dubai and the world was shaken. The morgue technician who discovered Aisha's body was not expecting anything unusual that morning. He was doing routine inventory when he noticed a freezer door slightly ajar, unusual for such a highly secured section. When he opened it fully, what he saw made his blood run cold. A woman wrapped in a hospital sheet, frozen. Her ID badge was still clipped to her uniform. Nurse Aisha Cruz. The alarm was raised instantly. Within hours, Dubai police swarmed the hospital. Security cameras were pulled. Swipe card access logs were examined. And there it was, Dr. Karim's ID used near the morgue at 3:17 a.m. When authorities approached him, Karim didn't resist. He didn't run. He just stood there expressionless, almost empty. But the most heartbreaking moment came when Aisha's mother was informed. She collapsed upon hearing the news. Her last words to her daughter had been, "Come home before you lose yourself." But Aisha never made it home. Meanwhile, Karim's wife, Layla, was called for questioning. But she didn't cry, she didn't faint. She simply said, "I warned him. He was destroying himself long before he destroyed her." The courtroom was packed when Karim finally spoke. His lawyers tried to argue temporary insanity, but the prosecution presented cold, calculated evidence. The concealment, the morgue access, the attempt to erase Aisha as if she never existed. The judge's verdict thundered through the room. Premeditated murder, life imprisonment. But some whispered that even life in jail was too merciful. To honor Aisha's memory, the Filipino community in Dubai organized a candlelight vigil. Hundreds of nurses and workers gathered outside the hospital holding signs. Not just a worker, a human being. Justice for Aisha. Her body was sent back to the Philippines, this time not in search of dreams, but in a coffin. Yet her story would not die with her. It became a warning, a lesson about love without boundaries and obsession without conscience.